phone conversation today. So what is the situation in Gaza? Is there any hope here? Our guest, P.J. Crowley, former special assistant to President Clinton for National Security Affairs. Mr. Crowley, thanks for being here.
Hello, John.
He controls, Mahmoud Abbas does, he controls most of the land that the Palestinians traditionally call their own, but only about half the population. Does he have a chance of making this government work?
It will be very difficult. Abbas has influence in the West Bank, but not in the Gaza. I think part of the problem for the United States is that we currently lack significant leverage in terms of influencing events on the ground in Palestine. To an extent, we have a one-party policy, and yet, as we've seen, there's really a two-party reality in the Palestinian territories where Hamas is a fact of life in the United States, and Israel and the European Union are struggling to figure out how to deal with that reality.
But given the fact that Hamas has again recently proved itself to be a party of apparently bloodthirsty thugs, how can you deal with them as a potentially governing force?
Well, I think part of the problem is that we have dealt with personalities over the last couple of years and not necessarily worked to build institutions of government that can effectively rule in the Palestinian territories. And in some cases, this new reality in Palestine, where there's a transition from what was a one-party rule under Arafat to now a multi-party rule, we have not yet figured out how to appeal to, say, so-called moderates, and some of the steps that we've taken over the past couple of years have actually undercut the Abbas government or the ability to form a unity government of moderates, and what that's resulted in is opened up space for militants and hardliners on both sides, both Hamas and Fatah, and so you're seeing the emergence of what could be described as a civil war.
Well, it's not going to go well for those Palestinians in Gaza. That place is under lockdown. They're not going to be getting food, medicine, that sort of thing. How long can they last without reaching out to the Israelis, to the United States, or maybe to Fatah?
Well, and that is a real dilemma, because on the one hand, we have tried since January of last year to isolate Hamas. On the other hand, Hamas seems to be gaining in strength. So I think there's a divide inside the international community. You don't want to precipitate a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And Abbas is in a dilemma because, what politician succeeds by turning his back on half of his population? And by the same token, to the extent that you see the emergence of a two-state solution, in the sense that the international community will support Abbas in the West Bank, isolate Hamas in Gaza, it almost incentivizes the militants within Hamas to strike at or create violence in the West Bank that further undercuts the situation. So it is really a dilemma for the United States, but unfortunately, through a combination of actions, the disengagement from the peace process over 6 years, the reliance on unilateral as opposed to process actions, we find ourselves today with much less leverage than we've in recent years. And to some extent, when President Bush and Prime Minister Olmert meet tomorrow, they're kind of outsiders looking in, and they have very, very little ability to influence events on the ground that are going much more rapidly than the ability to fashion a policy to deal with them.
All right, P.J. Crowley, thank you.
Okay, John.